The wind whipped across the barren landscape, carrying with it the scent of dust and dry earth, as the sun began its slow descent beyond the jagged mountains, casting long shadows across the cracked terrain. 3 young snipers moved with cautious precision, their bodies low and tense, like predators stalking unseen prey in a forgotten wasteland. Each step was deliberate, calculated to avoid the slightest noise that could betray their position. Their breaths came in shallow, controlled rhythms, but beneath the surface, their minds raced in a chaotic storm of fear, doubt, and determination. The target was a ghost, a man whispered about in intelligence circles, a ruthless war criminal who had slipped through countless operations, his name spoken. With a mixture of hatred and fear, he was believed to be moving through this stretch of land for only moments at a time before disappearing behind natural cover, making every second count for the team. The trio settled into their pre-assigned positions, near a crumbled wall of an abandoned structure, offering limited concealment but just enough to hide their silhouettes against the fading light. The youngest of the group, a lanky soldier named Jackson, adjusted his scope nervously, his fingers trembling, as sweat trickled down his temple. The weight of his rifle pressed into his shoulder, a reminder of the responsibility he carried, a single bullet that could change the course of the mission and perhaps even the war itself. Beside him was Carter, the unofficial leader of the snipers, his jaw clenched and eyes narrowed, scanning the horizon for the telltale sign of movement. His experience was evident in the way he whispered orders into the radio, calm but firm, as if trying to mask the pounding of his own heart. Each breath he took was measured, as if trying to still the chaos inside and maintain control over the swirling tension that threatened to unravel their focus. The third sniper. Lily was the most silent of the 3, her movements fluid and deliberate, like a shadow blending seamlessly with the landscape. She was known for her sharp instincts and steady hand, but even she could not deny the knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. The mission had already stretched longer than anticipated, and the weight of expectation pressed down on all of them like the oppressive heat of the desert sun. Their target was last spotted moving near a narrow ridge that overlooked a small village nestled in the valley below a place where innocent lives were at risk should the war criminal manage to escape, or worse, launch an attack. The snipers had been tracking his movements for days, relying on satellite images, intercepted communications, and informant reports to piece together his route. But the unpredictable terrain and hostile environment had turned what was supposed to be a quick operation into a prolonged waiting game that tested their patience and nerves alike. Jackson raised his rifle and took aim through the scope, focusing intently on a distant figure moving cautiously across the ridgeline. His finger hovered over the trigger as he fought to steady his breath, the wind tugging at his clothing like an invisible force threatening to betray his presence. The figure paused briefly in the open sunlight, a perfect shot if he could just hold steady and calculate the wind speed correctly. He squeezed the trigger and the rifle barked, breaking the silence of the desert, but the bullet missed its mark by inches, ricocheting off a rock behind the target. The figure disappeared behind a cluster of boulders before Jackson could prepare a second shot. The team held their breath, listening for any sign that their position had been compromised, but there was nothing. Just the eerie stillness of the land swallowing the sound like it had never happened. Carter cursed under his breath, his frustration barely contained. He radioed a quick update, trying to maintain composure while internally questioning every calculation, every choice that had led to this moment. The pressure to succeed was immense, knowing that failure could cost countless lives, not to mention the blow it would deal to their confidence as a team. Lily scanned the horizon carefully, her eyes sharp, for any movement or change in the landscape that could indicate the target's next appearance. Her heart pounded in her chest, a steady drumbeat that matched the ticking clock in her mind. Each passing second felt heavier than the last as she replayed the previous shot over and over, questioning what had gone wrong. Was it the wind, the distance, or simply a lapse in concentration? The sun continued its descent, painting the sky with hues of orange and crimson, signaling the approach of dusk and the narrowing window to complete the mission. The young snipers remained locked in a tense silence, punctuated only by the crackling of their radios and the faint rustling of the wind through dry brush. Their eyes never wavered from the distant ridge, their minds sharp but exhausted from the relentless anticipation. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught Carter's attention, a shadow shifting behind a rocky outcrop. He signaled quietly to Jackson and Lily that the target was in sight once again. But this time the man was moving faster, as if aware of the danger closing in on him. The snipers readied themselves, bracing for another chance at the perfect shot. Jackson raised his rifle again, steadying his breath with a new surge of determination. But just as he was about to fire, the wind shifted violently, blowing dust and grit across the scope, obscuring his vision. The moment passed, and the target vanished once more, leaving the team frustrated and unsettled. The stakes felt higher than ever with each missed opportunity, gnawing away at their confidence and resolve. Lily's voice broke the silence with a quiet but firm suggestion. They needed a new approach, someone with experience and precision beyond their own limited training, to steady the wavering aim and make the shot count. The radio crackled again, and a name was mentioned. Reyes, the female veteran sniper known for her unmatched skill and calm under pressure, a ghost in the shadows whose reputation preceded her. The young snipers exchanged looks, a mixture of relief and apprehension, wondering if calling in the veteran was the sign that their time was up, or a last hope to salvage the mission. They prepared to make room as the sun finally dipped below the horizon, plunging the valley into twilight and the unknown darkness ahead filled with danger and possibility. The night was just beginning, and with it came a new player who could turn the tide of this deadly game where every second and every shot could mean the difference between failure and success, between life and death. The night settled over the barren landscape like a thick blanket, smothering the fading light and bringing with it an eerie stillness, broken only by the soft whisper of the wind weaving through the shattered remains of the deserted village below. The young snipers crouched in the shadows, their breaths shallow and hearts pounding with a mix of exhaustion and anticipation. The failed shots of earlier hung heavily in, their minds weighing down their confidence as the reality of the mission's stakes pressed in tighter with every passing moment. Then, through the crackling static of the radio, came a voice calm, measured, and steady, a voice that carried the weight of countless battles fought and won, the voice of Reyes, the female veteran sniper, whose name was spoken in hushed tones across military outposts. Like a ghost story told in the dark, Reyes had arrived without fanfare, slipping into position with the ease of a shadow melting into the night. She took in the scene with eyes sharp and calculating, tracing the contours of the terrain and the positions of the young snipers who looked up at her with a mixture of respect and barely concealed desperation. Her presence was a stark reminder of the gulf between raw potential and hard-earned skill, a gulf that could decide the outcome of the mission. Without a word, Reyes settled into a prone position behind the crumbled wall, her breathing slow and controlled. As she raised her rifle to her shoulder, the night was alive with subtle noises, the distant howl of a lone coyote, the rustling of dry leaves stirred by the wind, the faint murmur of the village below. But Reyes was silent and still like a predator, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The young snipers watched in silence as she adjusted her scope, her eyes narrowing in on the ridge where the target was last seen moving. The tension in the air was palpable, a fragile thread stretched taut between hope and despair. The radio chatter stopped, as if even the voices in the ether held their breath, waiting for what was to come. Reyes studied the landscape with a practiced eye, calculating the trajectory, the wind, the distance, and the feint. heat waves rising from the rocks below. She had faced countless impossible shots before, but this one carried a weight that pressed into her bones, a weight born not just of the target, but of the innocent lives at stake and the future that hinged on a single bullet. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, as she waited patient and unmoving, her finger resting lightly on the trigger, her mind clearing of everything but the moment ahead. Then the target appeared again, a shadow slipping from cover and moving cautiously across the open ridge illuminated only by the ghostly light of the moon. Reyes exhaled slowly, and the rifle cracked a single sharp note in the silence. The bullet tore through the night with deadly precision, finding its mark with a finality that sent a shockwave through the valley below. The target crumpled silently, mid-stride, his body folding like a marionette with cut strings. The young snipers stared in stunned silence, disbelief and awe mixing in their gazes, as the gravity of the moment settled around them like dust. But even as relief began to wash over the team, a new tension took root. The mission was not over, not yet, for there were still questions. Lingering in the darkness, who was this Reyes woman whose skill could bend fate itself, and why had she chosen to intervene only now after so many missed chances? The rookies felt the weight of their own failures pressing against the cold night air and the silent promise that they would never forget this moment or the woman who had claimed victory with a single shot. Reyes gathered her gear without haste, her movements deliberate and unhurried, as if the night itself belonged to her. She cast a brief glance toward the young snipers, who now looked at her not as strangers, but as the measure of what they could one day become. The radio buzzed again with orders confirming the mission's success, but also warning of new dangers lurking just beyond the horizon, as she slipped away into the shadows, leaving only the faintest trace of her presence. The young snipers were left to grapple with their own doubts and aspirations. Each of them felt the stirrings of a new resolve fueled by the memory of the veteran's unwavering calm and deadly accuracy. They knew the road ahead would be long and fraught with peril, but now it was clear that skill, experience, and courage could tip the scales in even the darkest moments. The valley below lay quiet once more, but the echoes of that single shot would resonate in the hearts of those who heard it long after the night had faded and a new day began. A day shaped by the hand of a female veteran who had taken aim and succeeded when all others had failed. The night deepened as Reyes disappeared into the shifting shadows, leaving the young snipers behind, still trembling from the raw intensity of the moment. The air was thick with a mixture of adrenaline, exhaustion, and unspoken questions that hung like smoke in the cold desert breeze. Carter paced silently, his mind racing over every detail of the mission, replaying the failed shots and the miraculous success that had followed. The landscape around them was a ghostly tableau of crumbled buildings, twisted metal, and scorched earth, illuminated only by the pale glow of a waning moon. Jackson sat quietly, his rifle resting across his knees, eyes fixed on the horizon, his thoughts tangled in a web of doubt and determination. He wondered what it must be like to hold the calm and precision that Reyes had displayed, how she had managed to see through the chaos and wait for the perfect moment to strike. The weight of his own failures pressed down on him, heavier than the rifle in his hands, but deep inside a small ember of hope sparked quietly, refusing to be extinguished. Lily knelt by the broken wall, her fingers tracing the rough stones, as if seeking answers in their cold surface. She felt a strange connection to Reyes, despite never having met the woman, her skill and quiet strength inspiring something fierce and unyielding within the young sniper's heart. The mission had changed them all in ways they could not yet fully comprehend, but the path forward was clear and the stakes higher than ever before. As dawn crept slowly across the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of pink and gold, the team gathered their gear, preparing to move out. Their radios crackled with new orders, the intelligence confirming that the target had been neutralized, but warning of possible reinforcements closing in fast. The mission was far from over, and the fragile victory won by Reyes's shot now demanded swift action and careful planning. Carter took a deep breath, stepping forward to address the team, his voice low but steady. The success of tonight had been crucial, but it had come at a price the enemy would not sit idly by, and they needed to be ready for what was coming. The terrain ahead was treacherous and the enemy well armed, but they had a renewed sense of purpose, a determination forged in the fires of failure and redemption. They moved out with caution, blending into the rugged landscape like ghosts threading their way through the ruins, each step a careful balance between speed and stealth. The memories of the night's events fueled their every move. The image of Reyes's steady hand and deadly aim, a silent mantra pushing them forward through the shadows and uncertainty. Hours passed in tense, silence broken only by the soft crunch of boots on gravel and the occasional distant call of a bird disturbed from its roost. The sun climbed higher, turning the desert into a furnace and forcing the team to find shelter beneath jagged rocks and skeletal trees as they pressed deeper into hostile territory. The weight of their packs and the burden of responsibility bore down on them, but they moved with purpose, driven by the knowledge that every moment counted. Jackson's thoughts drifted, again to Reyes wondering who she really was and how many missions like this she had faced before. The quiet strength she exuded was like a shield against the chaos around them, a reminder that skill and experience could triumph even in the darkest hours. But he also sensed a mystery in her absence, a secret locked behind those calm eyes that made her more than just a legend. The team approached a narrow canyon where intelligence suggested enemy forces were gathering, a place where the shadows seemed to deepen and the air grew colder. Despite the sun's relentless heat, Carter signaled for silence, and the group spread out, taking up positions that allowed them to observe without being seen. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife, each breath a measured step toward the unknown. Suddenly, movement flickered at the edge of their vision. A group of armed men patrolling the canyon floor, unaware of the snipers watching from above. The young soldiers exchanged quick glances, their fingers tightening around triggers, but Carter raised his hand, signaling patience. The mission was not simply to engage, but to gather information and wait for the right moment to strike. Lily's eyes locked on a figure that seemed to command the patrol, a man whose features were sharp and eyes cold. She recognized him from the intelligence reports, a lieutenant known for his ruthlessness and cunning. The presence of such a high-ranking officer confirmed that the enemy was preparing for something bigger than they had anticipated, and the stakes had just escalated. Reyes's voice crackled through the radio, breaking the silence, her tone calm but urgent. She had been watching from a distance and was ready to provide support, or take the shot if necessary. The young snipers felt a surge of relief, knowing that the veteran was still with them, guiding their every move from the shadows, her experience a beacon in the darkness. As the patrol moved deeper into the canyon, the team observed silently, noting numbers, positions, and possible weapons caches. The information was vital, but so was the patience to wait for the perfect moment to act. A single mistake now could jeopardize everything and cost lives they were not ready to lose. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the rocky walls, the day bleeding into twilight as the enemy patrol returned the way they had come, leaving the canyon momentarily quiet once more. The young snipers regrouped, exchanging brief words, their voices low and steady, reaffirming their commitment to the mission and to each other. Carter glanced at the horizon where the first stars began to twinkle, his mind already racing ahead, planning the next move. The night would bring new challenges and new dangers, but they had faced the impossible before and survived. With Reyes' guidance and their own hard-earned resolve, they were ready to face whatever lay beyond the shadows as darkness fully enveloped the canyon. The team prepared to rest in shifts, their eyes alert and weapons ready. The night was alive with unseen threats and whispered dangers, but also with the promise of redemption and the faint glimmer of hope that one day, the war might end and peace would return to these broken lands. Jackson lay back against a cool rock, his thoughts drifting to the woman who had changed everything tonight. Reyes the legend, the ghost, the sniper, who had taken aim and succeeded when all others had failed. He wondered if he would ever see her again, or if she was destined to remain a shadow in the night, a silent guardian watching from afar. The mission was far from over, but the first step had been taken, and the road ahead was clearer even, if fraught with peril. The young snipers closed their eyes briefly, allowing themselves a moment of rest before the next chapter began in the long, dangerous fight for justice and survival. Night deepened its hold on the rugged canyon, wrapping everything in a cloak of darkness so thick it seemed to swallow sound and light alike. The young snipers lay in their scattered positions like statues carved from stone muscles, tense eyes sharp and minds alert despite the creeping exhaustion that tugged at their bodies. Each breath was a silent prayer, each movement measured and deliberate as they waited for the unknown to unfold around them. The distant stars blinked cold and indifferent far above the silent witnesses to the deadly game below. The radio crackled softly, breaking the heavy silence. Reyes' voice, calm and unwavering, carried through the static, a steady beacon in the night. She spoke of new intelligence intercepted, revealing enemy movements, shifting closer and faster than expected. The mission was morphing into something far more dangerous than they had imagined, and time was no longer a luxury. Carter's jaw tightened as he absorbed the information, knowing the window to act was closing rapidly. The canyon walls seemed to press in around them, narrowing their options and amplifying the sense of entrapment. The enemy was no longer a distant threat, but an imminent danger lurking just beyond the reach of their sight. A faint rustle to the left made Jackson's heart leap, his finger tightening on the trigger only to relax as a small lizard scurried across the rocks. But the moment was a stark reminder of how fragile the line between life and death truly was in this unforgiving terrain. Reyes instructed the team to prepare for an ambush. The enemy was expected to move through a narrow pass, within the hour a choke point, where their firepower would be most effective, but also where the snipers could make their mark and disrupt the advancing forces. The young soldiers worked quickly, checking equipment and repositioning their rifles for the coming battle. As the night air grew colder, the tension thickened each second, stretched out painfully long with the promise of violence. Looming just beyond the shadows, Carter signaled for silence, his eyes scanning the darkness for any hint of movement. The canyon was a trap waiting to be sprung, and the snipers were the bait in this deadly game of cat and mouse. Then a faint glow appeared in the distance, a flicker of movement, like a distant campfire signaling the approach of the enemy patrol. Their footsteps were muffled by the rocky ground, but the snipers could hear the low murmur of voices and the clinking of weapons, a grim chorus that sent a chill down their spines. Lily swallowed hard, steadying her nerves and steadying her aim. The moment they had prepared for was finally here. The enemy forces emerged from the shadows, moving cautiously through the narrow pass. A column of armed men marching under the cover of darkness, unaware that death was waiting for them above. Like hunters perched in the treetops, the snipers tracked their every movement, counting the numbers, estimating the range, and readying themselves to strike with deadly precision. Reyes took a final look through her scope, calculating the wind, the distance, and the angle, her finger poised lightly on the trigger, ready to deliver another lethal shot if the situation demanded. But the plan was not simply to kill, but to disrupt, to sow confusion, and force the enemy to retreat, giving their own forces time to regroup and prepare for the next phase. The first shot rang out, breaking the silence like a thunderclap reverberating off the canyon. Wall's chaos erupted below, men scattering, scrambling for cover, and firing blindly into the darkness. The snipers moved with practiced efficiency, picking off targets with ruthless precision, each bullet a silent messenger of death and warning. Jackson fired twice, his hands steady, despite the adrenaline surging through his veins. The taste of victory mingled with fear as he realized that this was only the beginning, that every shot fired would carry consequences that stretched far beyond this. Night. The enemy was regrouping, responding with a ferocity that matched their own desperation. The battle became a dance of shadows and gunfire, the canyon alive with echoes of violence and determination. The young snipers felt the weight of each life taken and the burden of those they could not save. But there was no time for hesitation, no room for doubt. Their mission was clear and the stakes higher than ever before, amid the chaos. Reyes remained a pillar of calm, her commands through the radio guiding the rookies through the storm. Her voice was a lifeline, steadying their nerves and sharpening their focus as they fought to hold their ground against the tide of enemy aggression. The sniper who had once been a ghost was now the heart of their team, a force that could not be ignored. As the enemy forces began to falter, the snipers pressed their advantage, driving them back step by painful step. But the victory came at a cost. A sudden explosion rocked the canyon, throwing dust and debris into the air and sending shockwaves through the soldiers. The source was a hidden mine, triggered by the enemy, or perhaps by chance, but its effects were devastating. Carter was thrown to the ground, clutching his leg, a sharp pain radiating through his body as blood seeped through torn fabric. The team scrambled to his side, their own fear and determination merging into a fierce resolve to protect their leader and complete the mission. Despite the odds, Jackson and Lily worked quickly, applying makeshift bandages and securing Carter as best they could. Reyes made a quick decision. The mission had changed again. They needed to extract Carter and find a safer position before continuing their assault. The radio crackled with urgent orders, coordinating a pickup and reinforcing their position, but time was against them. The enemy was regrouping, and the canyon was no longer a place of advantage, but of danger. The team moved with urgency, slipping through the shadows as the first hints of dawn began to lighten the horizon. The weight of exhaustion threatened to pull them down, but they pushed forward, fueled by adrenaline and the fierce desire to survive. The narrow pass that had been their battleground was left behind as they disappeared into the labyrinth of rocks and dust, as the sun rose over the canyon, revealing scars of battle and shadows of loss. The young snipers took a moment to breathe, to reflect on the night that had changed everything. The mission was far from over, but they had faced the abyss and emerged battered but unbroken. Reyes's presence was a reminder that even in the darkest moments there was hope and strength to be found in skill, courage, and the unbreakable bonds forged in fire. Jackson looked at his team, his comrades in arms, and felt something new stirring within him. A quiet determination tempered by the harsh lessons of war. They were no longer just rookies fumbling in the dark, but warriors shaped by the crucible of battle, ready to face whatever the future held, with eyes wide open and hearts unyielding. The canyon lay silent once more, but the echoes of the night's gunfire would linger long in their memories, a testament to the cost of survival and the price of victory. In a world where every shadow could hide an enemy, and every heartbeat could be the last. The first rays of sunlight cut through the dusty haze of the canyon, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the rocky terrain. The young snipers moved cautiously, their bodies aching from the night's battle, but their spirits unbroken. They had survived the ambush, escaped the hidden mines, and withstood the relentless pressure of an enemy that refused to yield. Yet as they pushed forward, the harsh reality of war weighed heavier with each step. The mission was not simply about survival anymore, it was about justice, revenge, and the thin line that separated the two. Carter hobbled along, supported by Jackson and Lily, his face pale but determined. The injury slowed their pace, but did not diminish their resolve. Each breath he took was a reminder of the stakes, the pain, a cruel companion that sharpened their focus rather than dulled it. The team knew that extraction was still hours away, and they had to make it through hostile territory before reinforcements could arrive. Reyes had vanished into the shadows after the ambush, leaving behind only a faint trail of whispered orders and a sense of calm that lingered like a ghost. In the air, the rookies both missed and feared her presence, knowing that without her, their chances of success had dropped, but also understanding that she had given them something far more valuable, a glimpse of what they could become as they navigated the labyrinth of jagged rocks and shifting sands. Jackson's mind raced, replaying every moment since Reyes took the shot that changed everything. The sharp crack of the rifle, the way the target had fallen silent and still, as if the night itself had swallowed him whole. Those seconds had shifted the mission from desperation to possibility, but they had also marked the beginning of a deeper journey into the heart of danger and uncertainty. The sun climbed higher, turning the landscape into a harsh, unforgiving furnace, forcing the snipers to seek shelter beneath crumbled walls and scant trees. Their movements were slow and deliberate, conserving energy and avoiding unnecessary noise. Every shadow was scrutinized, every distant sound, analyzed as the threat of enemy patrols loomed large. Their world was one of constant vigilance where trust was fragile, and every moment could be the last. Suddenly a sharp crack echoed through the air, a single rifle shot that sent the team ducking, instinctively hearts pounding in their chests. They scrambled for cover behind a large boulder, barely avoiding the hail of bullets that followed. The enemy had tracked their movement and was closing in faster than expected. The young snipers were forced to fight not just for their mission, but for their lives. Carter gritted his teeth, ignoring the pain, as he took up a defensive position, signaling Jackson and Lily to flank the attackers. The terrain was unforgiving, forcing them into close quarters where every shot counted and mistakes were deadly. The battle was fierce, chaotic with gunfire, ricocheting off stone and dust swirling like a storm around them. Jackson felt a surge of adrenaline pushing him beyond exhaustion as he took careful aim, picking off enemies one by one. His hands were steady despite the chaos and the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. Each bullet was a statement, a defiance against the fear that sought to paralyze them. The taste of survival was bitter, but intoxicating, fueling his resolve to keep fighting. Lily moved with grace and precision, covering their flanks, her eyes sharp for any sign of movement or threat. She was a whirlwind of controlled energy, her presence a pillar of strength. Amidst the turmoil, her calm voice over the radio coordinated their attacks, weaving a tapestry of strategy and instinct that held the enemy at bay amidst the gunfire. Carter spotted a figure moving through the chaos, a man clearly leading the enemy. Forces his movements were confident and ruthless. A commander whose presence turned the tide of battle with each shouted order and sharp command. Carter locked eyes on the man, recognizing him from intelligence reports as the lieutenant they had. Seen earlier, a symbol of the enemy's relentless brutality, determined not to let the enemy regroup. Carter made a split-second decision, signaling Jackson to cover while he moved to engage the lieutenant directly.